It's Wednesday, the 12th of January. A very warm welcome to the programme. This is Good Morning Europe, and these are our top stories.
France again reports record numbers of new COVID-19 cases, warning of a tidal wave of infections as the Omicron variant sweeps across Europe. Another round of high-level talks on tensions between Russia and Ukraine, this time at NATO. But the US says the alliance won't stop expanding. The pressure mounts on UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson to say whether he attended another Downing Street party in breach of pandemic lockdown measures.
France is one of several European countries reporting record numbers of COVID infections driven by the highly transmissible Omicron variant. More than 360,000 cases in the last 24 hours puts it at the top of an unenviable list. The country's health minister said it was a tidal wave of infections.
We have never observed such figures since the beginning of the health crisis. It's a tidal wave. The term is equal to the number of contaminations: 22,000 patients hospitalized for COVID-19, 3,900 in ICU.
Italy has also reported a record number of new cases, over 220,000, more than double the figure announced the day before. Although most infections are less serious than those caused by other variants, unvaccinated people are vulnerable. Staff at Cremona Hospital in the north of the country are urging people to get a jab.
The vaccine is the active tool in our possession that guarantees the least damage to health for those infected with the virus. It also guarantees fewer hospital admissions and even fewer admissions to intensive care units.
Another country beginning to see a rapid growth in cases is Turkey. Over 74,000 new infections. 2 weeks ago, it was only 20,000. The health minister has warned that Omicron will be dominant in Turkey within the next few weeks. It's a story that most of Europe is experiencing, with the ability to cope resting on vaccine availability and take-up.
The European Medicines Agency announced Omicron is moving COVID closer to being an endemic disease which humans will have to live with rather than a pandemic. The agency also expressed doubts over the usefulness of fourth COVID shots, arguing that repeated boosters were not a sustainable strategy.
We have not seen yet data with respect to a fourth dose, and we would like to see this data before we can make any recommendation. But at the same time, we are rather concerned about a strategy that entangles repeated vaccination within a short term.
The World Health Organization predicts that more than half of the European region will be infected with the Omicron variant within the next 6 to 8 weeks.
The Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation forecasts that more than 50% of the population in the region will be infected with Omicron in the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Kluge added that 50 of the 53 countries in Europe and Central Asia have now reported cases of Omicron. More than 7 million new COVID-19 cases have been reported across Europe in the first week of 2022, more than doubling over a 2-week period.
Preparing for attack. Despite the current series of diplomatic summits, the fear of a new Russian invasion is real, and it has these ordinary Ukrainians voluntarily training for the Territorial Defense Army. They say they want to protect their country when the Russians come.
It is important that we defend ourselves. It has been 8 years of war. I think everyone should be able to hold at least one weapon. NATO countries are not going to fight for us. That much is clear. So it comes down to whether we are willing to defend ourselves.
Whether there will be a new offensive or not, we do not know. But of course, the threat is real.
In the capital Kiev, old bomb shelters are being refurbished. This is one of 5,000 located under buildings and in metro stations. They were built in the Cold War to shelter from a possible attack from the west. Now they have to protect locals from a threat coming from the opposite direction.
Since 2014, after the annexation of Crimea and war in the east, we have been refurbishing the cellars. There is toilet paper, respirators, candles, soap, and about 68 people can fit in this bunker.
While Ukrainians prepare for the worst, the talks continue. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg is chairing a special meeting of allied ambassadors and top Russian officials in Brussels. The build-up of Russian troops on Ukraine's borders is fueling this major diplomatic effort to prevent open conflict.
Day 2 of high-stakes diplomatic efforts aimed at trying to resolve the standoff between Russia, Ukraine and NATO takes place in Brussels today. Speaking to NATO sources, there's a high level of scepticism about the intentions of the Russian side. Huge concern that perhaps the Russian side is looking for, quote, a pretext to invade Ukraine and is just using this time. But other sources say that perhaps if there is progress, that the two sides could work on areas of cooperation. If there is momentum after today's meeting, which starts at 10 a.m, then both sides will move to a further meeting in Vienna on Friday.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. To investigate the days that there weren't
party. Party. That's the impression UK PM Boris Johnson's creating for opposition MPs and the public, following the latest allegations of flouting COVID lockdown rules. An email showed as many as 100 people were invited to a socially distanced drinks party in the garden of Downing Street last year, when the rest of the country were barred from mingling outside.
I can understand we've lost in this country 150,230, I think is the latest figure, of our fellow citizens who've died from this disease. So I can understand that with these allegations, people will be upset and angry, which is why it's right that the Prime Minister asked for that independent investigation to be completed at pace to get to the facts behind these allegations.
But it's not the first time accusations of one rule for them and one for the rest of the UK have been levelled against the government. Lindsay Jackson is from Bereaved Families for Justice, and she says her mother died when the alleged party was going on.
I just had her funeral. I wasn't able to be with her when she died, wasn't able to hold her hand. I enjoyed the lovely weather that was spoken about in that email by sitting in my garden on my own and contemplating, waiting for her to die when she had COVID, waiting for her funeral, not being able to go and even pay my respects to her body. My mum was a very popular woman. There would have been hundreds of people who wanted to say goodbye to her. And there were 7 of us.
Downing Street says the events are part of an ongoing independent investigation. Boris Johnson declined to say if he attended the event with his wife.
Well, obviously the kickback here from the public has been pretty tough today, and that'll worry the party to some extent. These cries of hypocrisy, people saying, because they stuck to the rules back in May 2020, they weren't allowed to visit loved ones, to see people in care homes, to see those who are perhaps terminally ill. That's caused a lot of public outrage. But what will really worry the Prime Minister and his team is the mumblings going on, the mutterings in the party itself. They're going to be looking, for example, at the poll ratings, which are still putting Labour in the lead ahead of the Tories, and Boris Johnson's personal ratings as well as Prime Minister, which have been declining since June and reached an all-time low in mid-December, still pretty much there. That's what's going to be worrying the party faithful and the party unfaithful, and there will be mutterings perhaps over the next few weeks about whether whether Boris Johnson is the right man to take them to the next election, is the right man to be the Prime Minister and party leader.
Tennis superstar Novak Djokovic's participation in the Australian Open hung in the balance on Tuesday as the country's government pondered cancelling his visa again. The Serb was filmed back in training in Melbourne within hours of his court victory, allowing him to take part. A Twitter post by a Portuguese tennis reporter appears to show Djokovic was in Belgrade at Christmas, posing with the handball star Petar Djordjic. The tweet contradicts Djokovic's declaration that he hadn't travelled for 14 days before entering Australia. The player said his declaration had been submitted by his agent before he travelled to Melbourne from Spain via Dubai on January 4th. In order to recancel the visa, Australia's Immigration Minister Alex Hawke would have to be satisfied of grounds for cancellation, such as a threat to public safety, and that it was in the public interest. It's thought any such move would lead to a fresh legal challenge from Djokovic.